Hi, I'm Sarah Whorf, and in this video I'm going to walk you through how to make a very accurate registration system using a combination of a homemade Kento registration board and the addition of registration pins. So the pins you can find online. I've bought them from companies that use them for printing on circuit boards, and also I used to be able to find the stainless steel ones at Kelly Paper. So pretty easy if you look for register pins to find them online. So what I'm going to show you, the measurements and everything are set for a project for my students, but this could be scaled up to any size. So I hope this will help you make more accurately registered relief prints. For this project, we're going to be making a 2-block reduction print. Anytime you're doing either a multi-block print or a reduction, which is printing the block multiple times, of course, you want a really accurate registration system. So we're going to use this homemade Kento board, but we're going to make it even more accurate by adding registration pins. So we are printing a 6 by 8 inch block on a 9 by 12 inch piece of paper, which gives us 1.5 inch margins at top and sides and leaves us with 2.5 inches of paper at the bottom. We're going to use 1 inch of that to have the tape that's reinforcing the paper, as well as where we're going to place the pins. When you're completely finished with your project and printing, you would just trim this off. So we don't have to worry about the lack of archivalness of the tape at all. It's just there for when we're printing. So the measurements of this is a 4 inch by an 11 inch piece. There's a lot of right ways to do this, but I just cut out a 1 inch notch here, so that'll be where the board goes. Measured at 1.5 inches here, and then 2.5 inches here, because this is our bottom margin, and I've drawn a line like this. The reason for that is that when we go to place our pins, we're going to line our paper up along that mark. So when you're using these reg boards, we're not placing or taping down the pins and then making the paper match it. We're prepping all the paper, and then we're going to put the pins where we want them on the board. So I'm going to show you paper prep. What I'm doing is I'm using an old proof that I don't want, so I have an extra sheet of 9 by 12 to use as my registration paper guide. You don't have to do that. You could use one of your pieces of paper, but I find that this is a little easier for a couple of ways. So when you guys print your 2-run reduction, it's going to be the same size as the sampler and the key block. So that's also kind of nice to use this because I can get a sense of what's going on. So I flipped this over and I've lightly measured and then drew a line at the 1 inch mark. The reason I did that, and I'm not doing it on all my sheets of paper, but just on this one, and if I was using a good sheet of paper, I would draw it very lightly. But with a throwaway one, I can do that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add tape to the back of each one. Where we're going with this is you're going to be using these 1/4 inch registration pins. Be sure that you also have a 1/4 inch hole punch. Make sure that it's not a 3/8 hole punch or anything. So check the package when you buy one if you're buying one. I prefer to use masking tape, but you could use painter's tape for this, but I wouldn't recommend using Scotch tape for this. So this is 1 inch tape. The problem with that is we only have a 1 inch margin to have our holes punched. So what I do is I take the tape and I don't measure it or anything, but I just trim off a bit of it like that, which is kind of fun because you get this spirally thing. Okay, now I know that this is definitely less than 1 inch, and so it's going to fit really easily into my 1 inch area. The reason this matters is that we want to have 1.5 inches here as our final margin, so it's equal all the way around. If you put the tape higher than that, and then it's cutting into your margin space, and pulling it off the washi, it'll usually rip and hurt your washi. So we want to keep it within that 1 inch spot. What's really great about washi, one of the really great things, is that it's transparent a bit. So I could take one of my other pieces of paper, and this is the mulberry, And see how I can see that 1-inch mark? Makes it really easy. And then I am going to add tape to the back of every single one of my sheets of paper. What this is going to do, it's going to be reinforcement for my hole punches. We're going to be printing a lot. Placing the paper, taking the paper back up again, etc. So just try to put the tape, it doesn't have to be that exact, but you want it pretty much in the same place on every sheet. So make these big enough that, right, you've got some wiggle room there. So I'm putting the tape on the back. This is the rough side of the paper. It really doesn't matter which side you put it on at all, but I would say just be consistent. It'll make it kind of easier on your brain. You don't have to think. It'll be another indication like, oh, the back of the paper is the one that is the rough side that I'm not printing on, and that's where the tape is. Okay, once you have all your pieces of paper with the reinforced tape on it, then I'm going to go back to this sheet that I'm using, and I'm going to use a pencil, and I'm going to write on here that this is my hole punch key. The reason I do this is that if I decide to add more paper, you know, to what I did, I know that I could line it up with this one, and that would be the most accurate way to do that. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're just going to make 2 hole punches here. Really doesn't matter where they are, but what I do is I try to make one a little closer to that edge and the other one closer to this edge. And that's just something I do that if I somehow flip the paper and try to put it down the other way, it won't line up with the pins, and that'll, you know, tell me I'm putting the paper down the wrong way. So just a minor thing. You want the holes as far apart as possible, kind of. Like you don't want to put the holes here because then this could sort of rack a little bit. So the further are, the more stable that would be. So I'm going to do one here, and then I'll do this a little bit closer to the bottom of the page. Now I'm going to take a mechanical pencil, and I'm going to take each one of my pieces of paper with the same rough side up on both sheets, or the same smooth side up, whichever you're doing, but it's important that it's the same. Line it up, and then inside each one of these holes I'm going to trace lightly with the pencil. I'm not going to punch through that because then it'll make these larger. I'm also going to be really careful when I'm drawing that I'm not somehow spreading that hole at all. And then I'm going to line it up as well as I can. The tape might not release completely, so, but that's fine. Okay, and I'm going to keep doing that with every single piece of paper, so one at a time. This would be faster if we were in the studio for sure, because we have a jig where you can put the paper in and it'll punch the holes all in the same places. But we're doing it old school here. Okay, now with this one I can see that my tape isn't really in the right place. So before I punch this, I'm going to just do this. After I've done this to every single sheet of paper, I should be able to stack them up and the holes should all line up like that. On this one, I kind of messed up, and so I put more tape on this side and this side, and I'm going to re-punch that. Now, if you have a prehistoric hole punch like mine, or it's somehow, it just isn't doing really sharp, crisp hole punching, you can sharpen it by punching onto sandpaper, and that will help a little bit. So don't worry if your paper tears or your hole, like I had to punch it twice just to get the hole punch off of the paper. It just wouldn't come off. So I'm going to set this down again, making sure I've lined up with that other hole. Draw it again. Punch it again. Hopefully it will be good this time. Good. Okay. What's nice about using an old print like this, which is the same size that we're going to do with this new reg board, is it can help you really visualize what we're doing. So after you have taped for reinforcement and hole punched all your paper, you need to make sure that they're all hole punched in the same way. You should be able to stack up your paper and the lines, the holes, I mean, should all line up. This is with all the rough sides up. It doesn't matter which side you put the tape on, but you do want to have them all rough side up when you go to place your pins, because of course we're printing on the smooth side. So what I'm going to do first is get a couple pieces of tape. I recommend masking tape because we don't want these pins to move for the duration of our project. So I hole punch the tape and then I just tape the tab, you know, to the back there. This does not have to be a real accurate hole. And then I put this around that and the tape will hold on to the flange there around the pins, and this just makes them really easy to place them. And then I'm, you know, pushing here so it tapes to the flange of the hole punch. Okay, or I'm sorry, to the pin. So what I'm going to do now, you don't have to have a block here, but you can help visualize, it can help you visualize, see what's going on, right? You can see, oh, that's where the block goes. Okay, that makes sense. So I'm going to line this up. It can help to use some tape for this too, but you don't have to. It's another good reason to use kind of an old proof or an extra sheet of Bristol or something for this instead of one of your good pieces of paper. Obviously, this should be measured as accurately as possible. Okay, so I'm just going to really lightly tape this. Now what we're going to actually, that wasn't a good idea. I'll do that. Now I'm going to make sure I'm not moving this. I'm going to pick this up. Put the pin in the hole. The sticky side of the tape is down, of course. And then I'm going to place it right like that. And it's going to tape that pin right there on the block where my hole is in my paper. Then I'm going to take the other side of the paper, lift it up, and do the same thing. Put the pin in there and then lower it to tape it. Now I'm going to remove my hole punch key, which is the one I used for this, and I'm going to tape these down really, really well. Doesn't hurt to put, you know, another piece of tape or something on here because you do not want these to move. What I also do, because sometimes I have multiple of these blocks, is I put on here the date. I put it on the tape because I can take that off and put the pin somewhere else for a different project. And I'll put my, like a note of which print I'm doing so that if I want to come back and print some more, you know, I didn't finish printing them all or whatever it is, I know which board this one is. So with this reg board, I've added 4 more layers of mat board underneath, and I've offset this so there's only this one layer of mat board here, which can be very accurate for where I place the block, and I don't have to sort of drive myself crazy making all these other pieces cut as exactly as that. The idea is you're going to get better registration if there's very little height difference between this board and your woodcut. And so this brings it up to about, I don't know, 1/16 of an inch or something. So this is a little lower than that. If we had one layer of mat board, we'd be setting this down and it would have to come up, right, this distance to get to the block. It's not going to be quite as accurate. So I've just found that this is something that works really well. So when you go to print this, you're going to, of course, ink up your block, set it in there. Having the notch makes it really fast, really easy to get it in there. Of course, we're printing smooth side down, so you'd place your paper in the pins. I find that it's the most accurate if you always place it in the same pin first, whichever one that happens to be. Usually I do the one closest to me, just makes sense. And then if you're printing with oil base, you're going to have enough ink there that you could then just remove the board and then print. I find that that works better than leaving the board and the paper on the pins when you're printing, because sometimes I want to move the block around when I'm burnishing, hand printing in different places. If I was printing on a press, I want to remove this so that these pins don't, smash and go over under the roller. Then you're going to be really good registration and your print is going to hit in the same place every time.